So hello and welcome to a fabulous panel discussion today. This is about a book that was produced by the Association for the Changing Work Collective, Leading with Self-Awareness, Starting from the Inside Out. And there it is, like the author copies are out and people are psyched about it because wow, this is a really good book. I got a copy of it. I'm like really excited about it. And it's my pleasure. I'm Brett Hill, the founder of the Mindful Coach Association, a longtime member of the collective here to help facilitate a conversation with several of the authors and contributors, including Courtney Feider, Alec Kassan, Wendy McHenry, and Kathy Wells, who are joining us here today to talk about their contribution to the work. And it's quite a contribution. So before we proceed, let's have each of you, we'll start with Alec and then, we'll start Courtney and then we'll have the others follow from there to just introduce yourself briefly and your chapter and what it is that calls you to contribute to this work. So Courtney, if you will.
My name is Courtney Feider. I am an executive coach and a consultant or organizational development consultant. My chapter is called The Adventure of Slowing Down, and I was really called to talk about how the go slow to go fast way of thinking can benefit us, and just to kind of take a closer look at how some of us in Gen X or further back had some of those lived experiences that maybe some people these days are having less of with so much noise and input going on in the world. So that's mine is chapter 23.
Thank you so much. Alec.
Yeah. Hi, everybody. My name is Alec Kassan. I'm a health and wellness coach and co-founder of Pain-Free Comeback and a founding partner of Changing Work. And I help athletes and active people who are struggling with chronic pain become and stay chronic pain-free. I was a former semi-pro cyclist, and my career ended due to 2 years of chronic back pain, originally diagnosed as a ruptured spinal disc. And I've been pain-free and unrestricted for over a decade. And I feel called to share that with so many people because there's hundreds of millions of people who are suffering from chronic pain. And I want to show them that there's a way out.
Beautiful. Wendy.
My name is Wendy McHenry. I'm based in Raleigh, North Carolina, and I'm a senior leader at a technology company called CData Software here in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. I was called upon to contribute to this project because of what has been this massive shift in the tech industry the last couple of years with a lot of layoffs and the incredible impact that has had on people in my industry. And my chapter is called From Pink Slip to Inner Calm. And I share my experience of when I lost my job and the impact that had on me and what I've learned from all of the people I've been working with and coaching them through that process, and my suggestions for how to help you go through that process smoother, and just looking forward to the conversation today.
Thank you for being here. Kathy. Is it Kathy or Catherine, do you prefer?
They are interchangeable, so you can use Kathy. That's just fine. Hey, everyone. It is great to be here on this distinguished panel. It's been so great to get to know some of the other authors of this book because I think we have our unique stories, but we have kind of a common mission that we're all about. And I've been in the corporate arena for 35 years, so I've always worked in large structures, but my chapter is called Bridging Worlds. It's chapter 24. And what it's really about is learning how to occupy very different spaces that really shouldn't be that different at all. But we talk a lot about the journey into self-awareness and into doing the inner work that we need to do in order to occupy the space in the outer world that we need to occupy. So for me, my story's been about how do I take the plot twists that have happened in my life that have really caused me to go into really a very inner spiritual walk. And how do I bridge that into managing business and P&L and creating a culture where people can thrive as humans? So that's really what I focus on and part of my mission.
Well, that's powerful. I love that. Wow, what a great collection of really talented people. And you all, the thing I like about it so much is that your stories are so alive in this book. And to the people listening, it's like this book is really, it's not like, here's how you do things, although that's in there, as much as it is, the embodiment of the inhabiting these stories and how people came to learn these things, not from something that someone told them, but by living through working it out in real time. And that kind of wisdom is really hard to obtain and really valuable to learn from. So I invite you to check it out. Let's start a little bit of a discussion, if you will, with each of you, starting with Courtney, on the adventure of slowing down, which was your chapter. And this is a really, really powerful story because you started off with this journey to, I think it was Edinburgh in like back in the day, 77, so to speak. And your opening statement really caught me because you said, what if we all felt empowered to slow down?
Yeah.
And I thought about that from the point of view of like, well, that's such an interesting way to frame it. Empowered to slow down. Can you talk about what that means? Like, what do you mean when you say empowered to slow down? Because normally somebody who thinks about slowing down is kind of like, oh, I'm disempowered. I'm slowing down. I'm not getting enough done.
Right. In my situation at the time, it was 1997. I was in a situation where I was in university. I had a very heavy scholastic load, double major, double minor, very, very demanding school requirements and lots of other things going on. I was working, a lot of things were happening, and I had a very busy, packed life. And around that time, I experienced the loss of a very close friend. And that slowed me down by itself. But then I made a choice to go to the exchange office and make a decision to go live abroad. And I had never traveled to Scotland or anywhere outside of North America. And I made a choice to go live there.
So how did that happen in terms of, I remember reading your book, it almost seemed like by fiat, just kind of like you threw a dart on the wall or something. How did you pick Scotland?
Well, it wasn't that coincidental. There were two choices for a direct exchange, and one was New Zealand and one was Scotland. And my dad's dad was Irish and Scottish, and my name and my dad's name have a lot of history in Scotland. And by an ironic twist, many of my friends when I lived there were Scandinavian, and that's the other side of my dad's side of the family. So it became this melting pot of my family history. But when I first arrived there, I automatically felt at home. And I really, imagine 1997, we weren't using cell phones. We didn't have social media. My camera had real film in it. It was a different moment altogether anyway, but I also had a very light scholastic load. I had lots of time on my hands, but I didn't have a lot of distraction. So I would walk everywhere. I remember the first time I went back and visited, and I was in a car for the first time in that city. It was so bizarre to me because I didn't take taxis. I didn't take buses. It was bitterly, bitterly windy and cold, but it was just a very visceral, powerful experience on all levels. And I just had a lot of time to think.
And so did that. And then the other part of this is, so you had this immersive experience where you had time and your connection to like a more spacious living scenario. And then you came back. So what was that transition like? Like you mentioned, like, oh, I'm in a car. This is crazy. So how did you manage that transition?
It was culture shock in reverse for sure. I definitely had a lot less going there than I did coming back. It was very difficult to come back, and I had moments where I really didn't want to be back. I wanted to go back to the escape, but it was a suspended reality that 6 months because I put aside a lot of commitments. I put aside a lot of obligations to other people, and I put myself first. And it's a thing I have to return to a lot now in my work. I'm a nurturer. I'm a coach. I coach high-level executives. I have 2 children. I'm married. I have a lot of people who need me. And I have in the last several years really found myself returning to that idea that we have to make space for ourselves individually and really find who we are, make room in an empowered way in order to be good for anybody else.
Yeah. And you said in your chapter, in Gen X, as we were growing up and coming up in work, we were presented with forced resilience. And that kind of stood out to me as sort of relevant to what you're talking about here. So what do you have to say about, managing this culture of forced resilience, and speak a little bit about how you came to that insight?
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a place where I had a lot of access to nature. I had a lot of freedom. I think my generation grew up at a time where it was kind of like, be home before the streetlights come on. But it wasn't nearly what it is now. And so I think we didn't have a lot of communication. We would have to talk to our friends' parents in order to talk to our friends. We might have to wait 2 or 3 days to get a call back. We really had to go with the pace of what was happening and a lot less. We didn't just have the access to be in everything all the time. And so we had to learn as we went. We had to sort of, I guess, take a lesson from everything we walked through. And I'm not saying that's not the case now, but I do think it's almost like the enigma of the idea that we have all the answers these days, which I really don't think we do. But I do think that we struggle with that transparency as a culture. And I see a lot of signs that, Gen X is maybe the last generation that benefited from that real hands-on transformational experience and that opportunity for slowing down and that opportunity for pace. So I think as we go forward, it's going to require more people to like make room for that. And those of us who experienced it and have a muscle memory of it to really help those younger than us find a way to live it instead of it being automatic like it was for us.
Wow. Yeah. And so how does that translate to the work that you're doing now? Do you find that you're having to work with, not having to, but you work with executives and you work with, some pretty tense scenarios, people in some high-powered positions. How do you bring this same sort of insight to those who are struggling with the challenges of managing these high-pressured scenarios?
I mean, that's exactly why I wrote the chapter in the way that I did, because that's a centerpiece of the work that I do. I work with big enterprise businesses and usually people either just below the C-suite or reporting to or in the C-suite. And, I tell them from our first conversation, I can't slow the pace of what's happening around you, but I can change your perspective on it. And so, we really work hard on understanding who they are, what they need, what boundaries they need, how they're motivated, and then how that shows up in their behavior and how the people around them operate, and really looking at information and data, even in things like behavioral assessments, to understand their environment in a really tangible, specific way so that they can have better coping skills. And it's actually not as complicated as it sounds, but the reality is I can't turn down the volume in their work. What I can do is change their perspective and change their mindset and give them the opportunity to speak for themselves more, set more boundaries. A practical example would be, asking people for information before a meeting, or asking for some space on something, or, letting people understand how you operate and best ways of working with you. Those are things that I think we did more of a few decades ago that we do less of now. We kind of just go with the system, and the system becomes our value system. And I think that's where people get lost, is when their values and the values of those they work for get smashed together in a way where they can't kind of see one apart from the other.
That's a really, really powerful statement. The system becomes the value system.
Yeah.
That's really, really a key insight. So thank you so much. So we'll come back around to all the amazing authors at the end, and with how you can reach them. And also those notes will be in the show notes for the show. Alec, oh my gosh, your chapter was so powerful. I really enjoyed it. It's Alec Kassam, is that right? Did I get that right?
Kassan. It's
Kassan.
okay.
Oh, I got it wrong. And I tried to get it right. I really did. Kassan, Alec Kassan. From pain management to pain free. And oh my goodness, you were so invested in cycling and like becoming like the best you could be at that. And your whole world just kind of fell apart in a moment when you had this ruptured disc experience happen. And from my read of it, you kind of like really set you back. And there was this whole moment of like, who am I now? How do I manage this? Tell us about, kind of this almost like a dark night of the soul, so to speak, like where you really went through this transformational process.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, for context, when I was 18 years old, I was hell-bent on being a professional cyclist. I held a professional mountain bike racing license, and I was making a transition to road biking. And I was in a new category where I was going to be racing against professionals. So I wasn't being paid, but I was going to be racing against people who were paid. And I had a race that was coming up that Lance Armstrong had won 2 years prior. So this was back in 2011 when he was still doing his thing.
No competition.
Right? I mean,
Right.
get to that point, I had built my whole identity around being a cyclist. And as a younger, I was a young boy and who was more sensitive for his grade. And I didn't
Mhm.
really shine in the same way that, a lot of other adolescent or teenage boys did, right? And so I had finally found a sport where, my size, my stature could be an advantage. And it was kind of my way of being like, oh yeah, I'm okay being in the world. I'm okay as myself. But as I started to do these races, it was going to become very clear that at age 18, I was nowhere near what my ego expected me to be. And 9 days before that event, I was out on a training ride and just riding along. And out of nowhere, I just had this terrible pain in my lower back. It was like somebody was twisting the muscles in my back from end to end. And
Mm.
it was so bad that I couldn't sit on my bike seat. And it led me to see a chiropractor who was like, don't worry, 2 weeks, you're going to be back on top. Well, the pain kept getting worse and worse and worse. And after 6 months, I was diagnosed with a ruptured spinal disc, and had to be pulled out of college. I was partially bedridden for a time,
Wow.
was depressed, on painkillers, had suicidal thoughts, and was really thinking, like, forget being a professional cyclist. Like, I might not be able to sit on a plane or be able to sit through a dinner or be able to have a normal life again, which was really
Mm.
challenging as an 18-year-old.
Yeah, 18. Wow, that's a gigantic experience. And so you went, I guess, through a pretty dark place there, it sounded like. So, right? So how
Yeah,
did that,
that's totally the
what
way to put it.
happened? Like somehow you began to, you pursue like medical treatments and all of that. How did that work?
Yeah. So I was very, very focused on making healing my full-time job when I was away from college for over a year. And I tried every single physical treatment I could find. Everything short of surgery, because when I was presented with the idea of, hey, we could go in there and chop that little part of your disc off, I was like, I'm not even in my 20s yet. I know what happened long-term for back surgery. So I tried everything, physical therapy, chiropractic, acupuncture, energy healing, electro stim, all sorts of things, you name it. I tried it, and nothing was helping. And it started to really, I mean, obviously it was frustrating, but it was also perplexing because some days
Mhm.
I have more pain when I was doing everything the doctors said to do, to ice my back, to be horizontal, to not do too much physical activity. I could have more pain on those days than the days where I was kind of disregarding their advice. And I started to question, like, why is that the case? And I
Mhm.
read a book called Healing Back Pain by a doctor who teaches or taught at NYU. And he said how if you were to take 100 people with chronic back pain and 100 people who have no back pain at all, give them MRIs and X-rays, you will see the same number of structural abnormalities roughly in each of those groups. And so I started to question, how is it that somebody could have a ruptured spinal disc like me and have no pain at all, and yet I'm in immense pain? Like, what is that about? And it wasn't until I started to look inward and see how essentially stress can manifest itself in physical ways in the body that my pain actually started to make sense and to start to decrease and to go away. Huge shift from everything that I had been told about my pain and about my recovery and about my body. And that was a big, big light bulb moment that didn't fix everything, but was the start of my recovery.
Yeah, in fact, you said, put simply, my pain was a call inward to grow into authentic, beautiful, joyous, and connected life. And
Yeah.
so somehow that, led you not only to heal, but to connect to something bigger.
Absolutely. So, what we know about pain now is that pain is less a sensation and more a perception. The brain creates pain for all sorts of reasons. It can be due to tissue damage, but it can also be because your nervous system is dysregulated or overstimulated. And we talk about the placebo effect, right? Where you take an inert substance and you get a benefit from it. The opposite is also true. Like, what you're telling yourself about your body can lead to the nocebo effect, and it can literally
Mhm.
create physical changes in the body. And for me,
Mm.
the way that I was noceboing myself was putting just an insane amount of pressure in order to be enough to fulfill this athletic identity, to perform on the bike, to be seen as perfect. Something that nobody, let alone this 18-year-old with low self-esteem was going to be able to do. And it wasn't until I took a hard look inward at that and started to unpack the emotions that were associated with it, see the lack of self-compassion that I was treating myself with, and ultimately soften some of those personality traits, that I not just became pain-free, but opened up to like my true essence in a way, and became really much more comfortable and at peace with who I was. And that wasn't a professional cyclist, and that was perfectly okay. So it was kind of my mind's way of saying, you're putting a whole lot of pressure on yourself, and deep down, there's something else that's better for you. So
that's so powerful. I love that so much. The and now you also mentioned like how many people are suffering from chronic pain, and you're like moved now to like move this into the world in a powerful way.
Yeah. So get this. I saw a statistic the other day that encapsulated the magnitude of suffering when it comes to chronic pain. There are more people in the United States suffering from chronic pain than cancer, diabetes, and heart disease combined.
Wow.
Over 100 million people. And I deeply believe that there is a large chunk of them that do not have to live in pain or with as much pain. You know, so many people have been told that, you know, they're going to have to live with pain for the rest of their lives. They have to restrict physical activity. And, you know, for certain people, that might be the case. However, with me and the clients that I've worked with, you know, there's some pretty incredible changes that can happen when you start to question whether your body is actually broken. So for me, I've been pain-free and unrestricted for over a decade. I've done 500-mile bike trips. I've run a marathon, and I still have the same ruptured spinal disc on my MRI. It was never causing my pain to begin with. And I've seen time and time again, folks that are, you know, more than twice as old as I am, having massive breakthroughs in their pain, despite having things like hip replacements or arthritis, degeneration, herniated discs, degenerative disc disease, etc. So my kind of core message is that your body is Herculean, and the thoughts that you're telling yourself about your body matter.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It's such a powerful message. Alec Kassan. So
Casson. So my nickname when I was like,
what is wrong with me? I'm name challenged, so forgive me. Alec Kassan.
Okay.
Right,
Brett Hall, right? Hall.
Right, that's right. That's it. Brett, Brad, Brick, Braun. Mentioned all of them. So Wendy McHenry, so you have a chapter called From Pink Slip to Inner Calm. And I know that when people read the pink slip part of it, it's like everybody lights up and goes, that's me. I've been there. I know what this is about. And I don't know that they do, though, because you have a really, I would say parts of this are hard to read from. It's like, oh my God, what an experience you've been through. You write about the struggle you had as a result of getting laid off from work. And I'm rephrasing this in my own words. So, you know, please course correct this if it's not spot on, but it's like this, what I call like this triple whammy. You were getting involved in a divorce, you got a layoff, you're raising a child, and you're trying to find your way through all of this. And you talk about, you know, how you were so self-critical after losing your job. Yeah, I think about 10 million people are going, yeah, that's happening.
And I absolutely think my experience is unfortunately not that unique, right?
Exactly, right.
And especially we hear about it in the news, right? This company's laid off 1,000 workers. This company laid off another 500. And you know, you think about it, each of those people have families, they have livelihoods, right? And I think about the weight that they all carry, just like me, where I took it personally as I took it as something I had done wrong, as if I could have controlled the situation, which for me, I'm showing my age here, I was laid off as a result of the economic impacts of 9/11. And of course, that is not anything any of us could have controlled at the time. I mean, the timing, yes, was terrible because I was a young single mother and I had a very young child at home that I was caring for, and living in a very expensive city. And I mean, these are the thoughts that run through people's minds when they are laid off, right? They're thinking through all of their obligations, responsibilities. How are they going to do this? And the number one thing I've seen by working with people one-on-one, I've worked with probably close to 100 people who've been impacted within the last year and a half, has been they take it personally, they internalize it. It's something I did. It's something about me. It says something about me personally. I mean, I'm guilty of this as well. So much of my identity is tied into my work. So when that is cut off unexpectedly with no control, like think about the whiplash that gives people, right? And very much I think there's not been like a rule book on like, okay, what do you do? Like, okay, now I've gotten the pink slip. What do I do from here? And so I'm hoping this chapter can help provide people a little bit of a roadmap, first of all, to understand they're not alone. Right, that they've been through, that other people have been through this, and they've paved this path. But I also would love it to, the more people that have been through this and successfully land their dream job, to bring someone else along and help someone else along. And that's why I felt so obligated, right? Like I've been in their shoes. I know what it feels like, and let me help as much as I can, guide them through that process. Interestingly, Brett, I realized before jumping on our discussion today is World Mental Health Day. So what a perfect time to talk about this, right? Part of it goes hand in hand, the impact job loss has on our mental health, right? And how do we make sure we're supporting ourselves? And because usually when I think the natural reaction when you're in that place and you're suffering, that's actually the hardest time to reach out and ask for help, and admit that you need help, right? So it's having people around you that understand the situation and can, again, help. It's not only like connecting you, networking, job postings and things like that. It's understanding what I might need to take care of my mental health. I might need to do extra things. And I'll talk in a second, like what kinds of things I recommend through my own journey, where I'm very, very fortunate to have an incredible therapist that I still work with, and helps me handle a very stressful job, right? And God forbid if I'm ever in that position again, right? I at least feel like I now know like the direction I need to go to help get me through it. Because the immediate reaction I've seen from people, like because I'll hear from people literally, they will be like, I just hung up with HR an hour ago. They cut off all my access, like out of the blue. Like I hung up from that call, all my access was cut off. What do I do? Like, and they are literally distraught in that moment. And many people feel like they want to take action right away. And what I found was by recommending, hey, actually take the time. You've got a severance package. Take the time you need to process the emotion however you need, because some people have very strong emotion, whether it be extremely sad or extremely angry and everything in between, right? Taking that time to let yourself process the emotion. If you jump into that job search right away, you are carrying that energy in, and the recruiters see it, hiring managers see it. You're not showing up as your best self when you're doing that. So I recommend highly people take that time to take care of themselves. It's making sure you're hydrating, your nutrition is there, your sleep is there, your movement, whatever that is for you. I at the time when I was laid off, I was living in San Diego. I loved going hiking. We were of course, there's beautiful places to hike in San Diego. I do the same here in North Carolina. I like to make sure I'm spending time outside in the sun every day. Whether it's developing a meditation practice, whatever it might be. And I've seen people pick up some just incredible habits with their time while they were on their severance package. I've seen people do world travel. I have a friend who is still traveling the world. I don't know that she ever wants to go back to her old tech life, right? And she's had some incredible adventures, which I love reading about. Other people who, like Alec, adopt incredible athletic feats, right? People who are like, I've never run a day before in my life, and now, I just ran my first marathon, like after months of training, of course, but you know, they've built up into those habits. And then of course, if you are able to, some of these programs do include employee advocacy programs or therapist benefits. Highly recommend people take advantage of that. There's lots of great ways to find a great therapist today. I think it's Psychology Today has an incredible filter looking for therapists in your area. There's now apps like BetterHelp that help connect you directly if you want to meet virtually with a therapist. Or if finding someone in your faith or a friend who you can talk to and be able to help process those emotions as you go through. And I think once you are in that good spot where you've got, okay, I'm really taking care of my mental health, my self-care, and then all of a sudden you notice things start to get a little lightened and people are able to then engage inside the process. I will say this market that we've been in, like the last 2 years, is unlike any I've seen in my almost 30-year career, right? It is an incredibly challenging job market. And I do think there are people out there that can help. Certainly, please reach out to me. And if I can connect you with resources in any way, I would certainly be happy to do that. And that's where I think it really is the power of connecting with your network is extremely important. I know people don't like hearing it, but that is actually what it's about, right? It's about the people. And I really, truly have seen people land jobs that were so much better than the ones that they left, whether it's title or salary or what they're actually doing. They literally are able to spend that time and think about what they truly value. And honestly, I've also seen many people leave tech entirely and choose different paths. And so if you think of it as it can be a true gift of that experience of really getting to know yourself and what is important to you and what you truly want to do for your work.
Wow. So when you were like struggling with, how to, what do I do now? Was there something, because you mentioned a lot of the key things you suggest that were of value. Were there particular ones that were what I call touchstones that, like, when you were really, really kind of, struggling, what was your go-to sort of scenario to kind of help infuse you with a little bit of energy or get you through
to
those
help
moments?
me through it. At the time I lost my job, I was very fortunate to have found a women's support group. The group therapy, again, I didn't have very much money because I had just been laid off and I was very young. The group therapy option was very affordable, which is actually why I chose it. And something that was so unique about this group therapy program is we had a partner, and every month you had a different partner and you checked in with each other every single day.
Nice.
And I really think that helped me the most. I had the one person that I knew I could always reach out to and be like, hey, I'm having a hard time today. And knowing that they would be there to listen really helped me quite a bit. I also found, like, I was journaling a lot of the time. I've come in and out of that practice over my life that helps me. And but yeah, for me, I would honestly say it really was being able to have that one person I could reach out to.
That's really powerful advice, because there's nothing like that person-to-person connection.
Yes.
We are social creatures after all.
Yes. And I really also think what I've seen coming out of the pandemic is that is where we've most been hurt, is by the loss of a lot of our personal connections. And I see that as something people are craving so much right now, is that connection and that community, right? And so if you think about that, the people in your network and in your community who might need that connection from you, and if you can be that for that person.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much, Wendy.
Thank you.
Catherine, your chapter on bridging worlds is really special, I think, in many ways. Tell us, what is an edge walker?
Yeah, it's a good question. So that term was actually coined by an author by the name of Alice Walker. And she actually talks about the fact that people can occupy very different spaces at the same time and literally create a bridge between them. And that edge walkers are doing that. You're kind of walking up to the edge of a different horizon and looking out upon it to say, how can I occupy that space without completely leaving this one? And so you become very multifaceted in how you see the world, how you think about the world. And I think today we're living in this strange, well, maybe it's always been this way, but there's a lot of categorization. There's a lot of division. I mean, here we are in an election year, right? You're red, you're blue. This is who you are. I'm going to put you in a box. I'm going to decide who you are. But the truth of the matter is, as human beings, we are very, very complex. And as Wendy talked about community, and we're all talking about the power of connecting, which is what changing work is all about, we come to understand that we all share many, many things. We have unique visions, but we share a lot of core needs, and that is the way that we'll connect. That is the way that we will unify. So being an edge walker is how do you bridge worlds that may on the surface feel very different, but they're really not.
I love that so much. In fact, the title of your chapter is Bridging Worlds. And in it, you talk so much about exactly that. And the place that you're occupying in your life, I think, or in this book is really interesting. Here's a quote from a part of your chapter. I started to bridge very different worlds. One as a corporate leader working to meet tangible business results, and another on a deep spiritual journey into the awareness of what must be healed to uncover the parts of us that are begging to be seen and celebrated. How do you get one foot into corporate America and one foot into healing ourselves so that we can be celebrated? That's a big bridge. And so I'm really interested in that.
Yeah, it's a big bridge. But I think we're at a time in history where we are all seeking to operate from a higher level of consciousness. And the business world, and COVID really launched this as people had to go inward at that time and revisit what their lives were all about. We're at a time where business is ready for a different conversation. I don't know who actually said this, but I believe that it is true that an organization can really go only as far as the consciousness of the leader. So how are we leading our teams? How are we leading our people? In my story, and it was actually a slight tangent, when all of us were coming together for this book and sharing our stories, there were a lot of us that had a physical breakdown. So Alec talked about his, but a lot of us that our bodies actually said, like, nope, you're on the wrong track, and forced us into an inner dialogue. And I was so amazed with 25 different authors that for many of us, the invitation into this different way of being was through physical breakdown of our bodies. And that, yeah, it's my story, but it's all of our stories together on how do we come into a different way of being, as Courtney talks about how to move slower, as Wendy talks about how to actually embrace the beauty of yourself and not the circumstances that you're in. So I think we're ready in business. It's still evolving because we very often say, well, here's the business and here's the people, that they are one united thing. And we're learning how to use the language in the corporate arena of our inner work, our ability to see what's happening outside of us, to be more grounded, to manage the anxiety and chaos. Courtney coaches people on this. How do you manage a world that is moving much faster than you want it to move? So it's an ongoing journey that we're all on together, I think.
Indeed. Another part of your chapter is, I would say, a challenge to be bold or to be brave. You said, there's nothing wrong with the blueprint so many of us follow, as it offers great gifts and experiences, but it's the nuance, the unconscious inner knowing that we bring forward that starts to reveal who we must learn. Questions about meaning and the purpose often go unanswered if we are too busy following a prescribed recipe for success.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, is this an invitation for people to kind of step out of their comfort zone and explore who they are?
It very much is. And I would challenge anyone listening to this conversation. I think it's very natural. And I was in this situation where I call it the paint by numbers life. We are all kind of taught, oh, well, this is what you do next. And then you go to school, and then you get married, and you have kids, or you do all these things that feel very normal on what you're supposed to do. But the truth of the matter is, all of us have an inner calling, an inner voice. It's always nagging, like, this is who you truly are. I mean, as Alec tells his story, there was so much, what the work he's doing in the world now was emerging out of that inner calling of him to know who he was, and that in the way he was made and everything he was made of was destined to do what he's doing today. True of all of us. I see it all the time as we get into these discourse conversations in the corporate arena, of the inner dialogue of not being worthy, of not thinking their story is worth telling, of not being good enough to occupy a space, when the truth is we are brilliant, magnificent beings who are here to share our gifts, and that gift is different for everybody. So the throwdown here is follow your path, dance to your tune. Your family might not agree, people at your work might not agree, but you will end up in a much more expansive place if you listen to that.
Wow. I love that so much. It's such an invitation to be authentic, and inhabit who you really are. And I think, the kind of behind the scenes message here is that that's kind of the new face of, if we're going to revise business, change work, which is literally the whole purpose, that's what it's got to look like. It's got to look like embracing authenticity in the organization and in the people. So let's have a more generalized discussion. Like, what are the common threads here, and what's resonating with you? And so anyone can speak up here.
Well, I wanted to just add on to what Catherine just said.
Sure.
Right. The thing about work that when I'm coaching people through, I say, go where you're celebrated, not where you're tolerated. Right. And to me, it's all about, what are your strengths? What are the passions? What are the things that light you up and give you so much joy about your work? And then do more of that. And that means, sometimes it means changing the seat you're in. Sometimes it means changing the company. Sometimes it means changing your career path entirely. But I completely agree, Catherine. When you're in alignment there, I think, that is where I really see people just shine.
Yeah, it's like magic, and often we have to get through. There are certain barriers around fear of stepping into an arena that maybe you're not used to being in. And so I think it's being able to follow that excitement, follow your greatest joy, and know that you'll find yourself in a much better place.
And I can add to that too, stacking a little bit on what we're saying here, and also some of the threads of what Alec brought in, that whole body keeps the score idea. Your body holds these memories of these things, but also in the psychology, when we're working against who we really are, we're in cognitive dissonance. And so we are in almost microaggression with ourselves. And so there's kind of this beautiful altruism to the idea of being ourselves, but there's also a real practical, tangible, physical, somatic reality and psychological reality that I think we can really do destructive work against our mental health and to our bodies if we don't do that. So there's, in my opinion, a bit of an obligation.
1000%. And to add on to that, actually, before I do that, talking about bridging worlds, like Catherine, the title of your chapter, I don't think anybody else could have tied in all of the stories that we've talked about individually so beautifully as you did, in terms of bringing yours in as well and kind of mixing all this together. But when we talk about, you mentioned, Courtney, body keeps the score, Bessel van der Kolk, so often when it comes to healing or just life in general, we give up our power. We think that somebody else has the answer. Somebody else has the blueprint that we need to follow. We think we need a pill or a procedure or practitioner in order to fix us. And so much of what I work on with clients and what I try to embody every day is following my own blueprint of success, doing what feels natural for me, not normal for society. Because you look around and see all of the challenges in the world that we've collectively almost created in a way. It's really easy to be sucked into this idea of my own authenticity doesn't matter, or I shouldn't listen to my inner voice. And I think so much of the problems that we see in the world are a manifestation of that. And so I think what we're all doing in different spheres in different ways is bridging the world between, you know, the inner voice that we have and making that manifest and sharing our authenticity.
And I could add one more small thread to say, you know, I think something that really crashed in for me, maybe just before we all came together for the book, well, a little bit before that, but let's say it's been an ongoing thing for about a year and it really kind of came together with the conversation around the book. I think we need to remember that everything we do is a form of relationship related to other people. And that could be as simple as liking a post on LinkedIn. It could be as complex as having an hour-long phone call with somebody, or it could be as complex as forming a new real relationship. But I think we have to be really conscious of how much energy we're expending on what's around us, because there's a lot of things that can take it in today's society. That was part of my, you know, I guess, comment in my chapter about slowing down and kind of going back to a simpler way of doing things a little bit. And I just really think we're using a lot of energy on the wrong parts of relationships sometimes, or interacting with things because they're right in front of us, and forgetting that there needs to be intentionality behind that. And we need to save something for ourselves, you know, and really feel some confidence and some anchoring around what we need. I mean, I imagine that Alec came to where he came to with his brain breakthroughs because he got confident about his path being a right path. I imagine that Catherine has brought this together, these bridges and bridging the world, because of the confidence around the impact of that, and Wendy around the confidence of moving through something and knowing she can move through it again or help others. Like, I think we all kind of have a mission to help people understand that the very intentional and positive use of our energy is really, really important, and that we can really be pulled in the wrong direction of using, you know, energies just toward organizations or toward empty social media scrolling, or there's way too many things that can take up our time.
Right. And Catherine, I think it unfortunately says a lot that so many of us are brought to this work through our body giving us those signals, right? That it takes that breakdown for people to pay attention to what's happening, right? I mean, I think, I mean, I know that happens to me where I'm like, okay, my body, and I was actually reading this today. It was saying, if you're having a bad mental health day, you need to treat yourself as if you were physically ill. You need to do those things. You need to slow down. You need to hydrate. You need to sleep. You need your nutrition, right? You can unplug the social media, right? And I thought that's such a great message. And so, you know, I like I tell my kids, do as I say, not as I do. Learn from learn from my mistakes. But sometimes I wish the body would keep the score a little less.
Well, and I think part of our shared mission is to try to get this work out there before you end up in a hospital room. Like,
Right.
how do you create? That's what awareness is. It's like, wait a minute, you know, I mean, my Aura ring often tells me, you know, oh, you might need to slow down. But how do I start listening to what's really going on? And Courtney, to your comments, I think we're in a crisis of attention, and we change channels a million times in a day from the phone and notifications. There's a lot of science behind this that is showing not only does it drop our IQ, but we aren't even present for our life.
Yeah.
We're not there. The quality is going away. And so what Courtney's talking about with slowing down is so critical for all of us, because that's how we'll take the signs from our body, and that's how we'll make the quality of our interactions so much better.
Yeah. And if I can build on that for 1 second, I think, Catherine, what you're saying is so important because, you know, if you think we are animals when it comes down to it, we are in wild natural things, and we don't have the luxury of a closed loop of feedback like the natural world does. You know, like if you think of the animal world, it's a fight, flight, or freeze. There's a death or an injury or a running away. But we often have experiences where we don't close the loop, where we start with something that's a conflict and it doesn't get finished, and then something else layers on top and it doesn't get finished. And I think unless we really pay critical attention to these signals, to Catherine's point, we can repeat the cycle of hurting ourselves. You know, it can keep happening. If it's happened to us once, hopefully it won't keep happening. And hopefully this book can help people learn, to Wendy's point about, you know, what we've been through, and not necessarily go through the same, but if they have already, to know that it doesn't have to be a repeating, consistent, constant building cycle, that there is a way to break that pattern. And a lot of times by being with other people.
Nice. So we have about 10 minutes left. So let's take a couple of moments for you each have enough time to kind of say some closing comments to the audience. Like, you know, what are the, you know, closing words, like what do you want to take away? What would you like to say? And then also, how can people get in touch with you to find out more about your work? So we can start in the same sequence with Alec.
Yeah. So for me, the biggest takeaway that I will share is your body is Herculean. And that doesn't mean that you are, ripped and toned like Hercules, but you have an innate Herculean quality that you might not have tapped into fully. And when it comes to, like, if you are somebody who is dealing with chronic pain, there are so many resources out there, and there's so much good science and practices that are showing that mind-body treatments, that pain psychology treatments are possible. So the organization that I co-founded, Pain Free Comeback, painfreecomeback.com, we work specifically with athletes and active people. And I use the term athlete very broadly, from somebody who is a competitive triathlete to someone who just likes to go for walks. And I have a whole bunch of resources on the site there that can help you understand blind spots of where you might be keeping yourself in pain, what to do about it, and a whole bunch of just free resources that I want to give away to change the way the world sees and understands chronic pain. So painfreecomeback.com, and you can also reach out to me directly at alec@painfreecomeback.com.
Thank you so much. Courtney.
I would offer that from my own experience, and a message I need to tell myself every day. If it feels like slowing down is a waste of time, just remember how much time, energy, pain you can save if you just give yourself that gift. So, just to really take the opportunities every single day when possible. And I really want to add to that I think the connection to the natural world, a big part of my experience that's in my chapter, was about breathing fresh air and being outside a lot. I'm in a city, but still, being outside, not being so contained and kept to a rigor and a schedule. So I have a team, and we do work together at thesewildhumans.com. And we really try to work with enterprise business and medium-sized business and help executives and their teams help understand each other and come together and really do this work together and have each other to lean on and rely on and listen to, and really, start to change the way that they do things, and start to, via each individual person, change a whole organization. So that's the work we do at thesewildhumans.com. And I'm reachable on LinkedIn, just with my first and last name, Courtney Feider, or at Courtney@thesewildhumans.com. And we always have free conversations with someone who just wants to try to understand what we do and try to understand how we can help. And at minimum, we usually give them some references to some great resources. And I'll last just say this book has been a wonderful experience. And to some of the points made by the other authors, I think it's been eye-opening to see how much common ground we have, even in spite of having really, really different, broadly varying experiences.
Thank you so much. Wendy.
So I'll start off by saying, if you have been impacted by a layoff, just remember, it is not your fault. Extremely high performers have gone through this too, right? It is a business decision. Sometimes it's a spreadsheet decision. So you have to do everything you can not to internalize that. And hopefully the chapter gives some suggestions for finding your inner calm if you've been through a layoff, or actually through any challenge, right? Let's all keep having the conversation and reduce the stigma around mental health. The common thread I'm hearing here as well is we heal through community, right? We are not meant to live as solo animals, right? We're pack animals. So, find your community, lean on your community, and then be that community for someone else. Certainly, I am happy to be here as a resource, especially if you work in the technology industry. Please reach out to me on LinkedIn. You can find me at Wendy McHenry, also Wendy Mac 98 on LinkedIn, and always happy to continue the conversation there.
Thank you, Wendy. Catherine.
Well, I think in closing, I just want to express my gratitude to my co-authors, both here on the panel and throughout the book, for the journey that we've been on together. I would say, for those listening to this conversation, for anyone who picks up the book, it's really an invitation. It's an invitation into greater self-knowledge, self-awareness, because the more we individually do, the more we help everybody. We've talked a lot in this panel about community and how we're different but the same, and there's a lot of common threads. So for every time you slow down, for every time you listen to the voice inside of you that is authentic and true, for every time that you're bold, and for every time you take care of yourself, you're not just doing it for you, you're doing it for all of us. So I just want to say thank you for the journey and the opportunity to share the story and share perspective. And you can find me, you know, I am full-time in my corporate gig. You can find me on LinkedIn, but I also lead a podcast for the company called the Coca-Cola Compassion Lab. You can find me there.
Thank you so much. Wow, what an amazing collection of stories. And, you know, we have like 1 extra minute to kind of talk about, maybe 1 or 2 extra minutes just to kind of thread the common needles here. And Catherine, it's kind of, I feel like you're in the role of like the holding the whole. What do you see here as like the common ground for all these stories?
I feel like if I were to think about a through line for all of our stories, it's that for many of us, we were living under the expectations of an external program or an external dialogue that we thought we needed to be perfect, look a certain way, be a certain way, our identities from our jobs. And a plot twist happened to all of us that made us become awake and alive to the truth. Well, the truth was not the outside voices, the truth was the inside voice. And for every story in this book, you see how that truth manifests into a mission to bring more people into that place of greater peace and truth for themselves.
So powerful. Any other reflections quickly?
No, well said. I
you.
want to say a big
ahead.
thank you to Brett for facilitating such a beautiful discussion with all of us and holding this container, as well as to Trisha for all the behind the scenes work and making this happen, because it doesn't happen by accident. It takes a whole organization.
Thank you, everybody. So this book that we're talking about is called Leading with Self-Awareness, Starting from the Inside Out. There's Alec is doing a great job. There's the book and the cover, and it's available on Amazon under the section of what's it called, the media, changingwork.org, under the section of media. You can find it there on the website. It's a collaborative book with 25 authors, no less spectacular than these great souls here from the Changing Work community. There's also a really interesting foreword there by Gary Ridge, who's from WD-40 Company. You can find it, and there's a special offer of a 50% off with a promo code, which I'm sure you can find on the website, which is good for till November. I am Brett Hill, a founder of the Mindful Coach Association, somatic coach, and very happy to be called on to facilitate such a illuminated group of insightful and impassioned people who are committed, like I know you are, listeners, to helping people in the world. And that's one of the things that is so powerful through here, is like the struggle of really embodying that and putting that out. And so I just wanted to thank all of you here for showing up and, you know, lighting the way. Well, I want to say, first of all, doing the hard work of making this real in your own lives, and then landing in a place where you want to make it real for others as well. That's what the world needs right now. So on behalf of the world, thank you so much. Sometimes I'm bold enough to speak on behalf of the world. And this is one of those cases you're all doing the work, and I really appreciate that. So check out the book, and also check out all of these contributors, find them in their various places where you can connect with them, because they're doing magnificent work. And blessings to all of you who are listening.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.